Sounds good.
Should be recording now. And I'll say start webinar. All right. There we go. We've got some attendees joining. I always say I wish that Zoom would play some intro music or something as we wait for attendees to join in. So give it a couple minutes until 6. Looks like we've got about 7 people. Thanks for joining in. We're just waiting a little bit till more people join in because I know we've got more than 7 people here. So
they said there was actually traffic tonight, so
yes,
it's taking a little longer, which
people
is
get home.
I'm not used to that.
Yeah.
Good sign.
Yeah. Hopefully maybe people can sit outside during this. This is my favorite weather.
Oh, it's wonderful.
So can open our windows and join it.
This is my time of year for sure.
Give it about 1 more minute here. Okay, close enough to 6 here. Welcome everybody. Thanks for joining our Mendota After Hours on Zoom webinar tonight. I'm joined by some Fort Snelling staff, Kimmy and Nancy, and they will introduce themselves in a little bit. But first off, just some Zoom housekeeping. If you haven't done a webinar yet, you're doing great if you're here. And if you can see us and hear us, we cannot see or hear you, but that's how webinars work. If you hover on the bottom of your screen, you'll see a little chat bubble icon. There's 2 of them. There's a chat option and there's a question and answer option. Feel free to interact with us in that way. You can send comments if you would like in the chat, or if you have a question while during the presentation when we're watching, you can send it in when you think of it, and then you don't have to forget. And then we'll just keep it until the end when we have time for question and answers. We've already got 1 little chat in there. They say hello from Lino Lakes. So that is fun, a good way to interact. My name is Michaela Harder, and I'm the site supervisor for Sibley Historic Site in Mendota. We're right across the river from Fort Snelling. Each month we do this program called Mendota After Hours, and each time it's a different historic topic. Normally we would join at the site and enjoy some light food and drinks, but now we get to enjoy our own food and drinks at home. We're able to provide it free to you all, and your donations are really appreciated. We've been able to keep this going every month from donations. So thanks for participating and for joining us this evening. I am going to let Nancy introduce herself.
Thanks, Michaela. Well, my name is Nancy Cass, and I'm the site manager at Historic Fort Snelling. And I have been at the site, I'm in my 21st year with not only MNHS, but all 21 years at Fort Snelling. So first of all, I would just like to say thank you for joining the program this evening. We're excited to be here, and thanks to Michaela for inviting us to be a part of the Mendota After Hours program. I think we're all experiencing not being able to do many of the things that we love to do and right now. And that's definitely the case with us at Historic Fort Snelling. With COVID and with being under construction as we are for our new visitor center that will be ready in 2022, and also, so the two combined, the COVID and the construction, we're not able to be open, and it is very, very difficult for us. Believe me, we'd love to be there. However, our team has really taken this opportunity to put our energies into the world of digital learning. And we have learned an awful lot doing that, I will say. It's been wonderful. But this is enabling us to share some incredibly important stories with people, despite the fact we're not able to gather at the site. And we're sharing these with teachers and their students, senior homes, and audiences like we have here tonight with you. So we're excited to bring that to you. So one of the topics we have worked a great deal on at the site is the focus of the film that we're going to share with you this evening. And it was developed by one of our staff, Kimmy Tanaka, and she'll introduce herself. It's an example, again, of the way we can share content and stories and keep that dialogue going despite, you know, a different venue to do that. So I'm going to let Kimmy introduce herself. I do hope that we'll see you at the fort, and I know over at Sibley here as well. But I hope next summer that you'll come out and check us out and these stories and dive into some of the content. So I'm going to go ahead and I will turn it over to Kimmy.
Thank you, Nancy. Hello, everybody. My name is Kimmy Tanaka. I am one of the program supervisors at Historic Fort Snelling. Thanks to everyone for joining us this evening on a very lovely Friday night. For some of you who may not be as familiar with the Twin Cities, our site is located, like what Michaela said, across the river from the Sibley Historic Site. And we were home to the Military Intelligence Service Language School, or the MISLS, during World War II. We are one of 26 Minnesota Historical Society sites across the state. And in just a moment, I'll share a little bit of the history of the site, but I did want to say thank you to Michaela for having us and for this great opportunity to share the history of the language school. The tour film that we will watch tells the stories of what life was like for the Nisei, or the second generation Japanese American men and women who trained at Fort Snelling before their deployment overseas. It is available on the MNHS YouTube channel, and we can provide a link later if people would like in the chat. Michaela is going to stream the film, and then I will try to monitor the chat to see if there are any questions that come up while you watch it. To give you a little bit of context before we watch, the Fort Snelling Historic Site is it encompasses the reconstructed 1820s era fort structure, which is sometimes referred to as the lower post. And starting in the 1860s, the military reservation expanded out to what we now call the upper post. So most of the buildings which were used for the MISLS are located in the upper post near where the Twin Cities International Airport is today. Currently, today, much of the upper post is under the purview of the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, who is working with Dominion Development to secure funding for the rehabilitation of 26 historic buildings. They're hoping to create up to 215 housing units with a preference for military veterans and their families. So you'll get to see some of these buildings in the video. And so without further ado, Michaela can go ahead and start the film, and then we'll come back and reconvene with a question and answer session.
I'm gonna start it and make sure you holler if something's going weird when I share it, but we should be ready here. Okay.
Located between Minneapolis and St. Paul, Minnesota is Historic Fort Snelling. Historic Fort Snelling resides on Dakota homeland located at Mendota, where the waters meet, at the confluence of the Mississippi and the Minnesota rivers. The site's history spans over 10,000 years, a little over a century of which covers the fort's history as a base of military operations. Starting in the 1860s, the military reservation expanded beyond its original 1820s-era walls, and by the 1880s, new buildings were added in the upper post.
Were we able to hear it? Nancy, you can? Okay, I can on mine, so I'll keep going. Double checking. Thank you for your patience, everybody. I just want to make sure we can hear that.
Post, while the old fort buildings began to deteriorate. By the 1940s, only 4 original buildings remained: the South Battery, the officers' quarters, the Commandant's House, and the Round Tower. From 1941 to the end of 1942, the military reservation was expanded to 300 buildings, and more than 300,000 men and women were housed and provisioned there. While thousands of recruits were processed through Fort Snelling, Minnesota was about to become home to a specialized military program. About 1 month before Pearl Harbor,
I'm going to pause it one more second. Okay, Sarah says in the comments they can hear, because I have it on my personal computer and I cannot hear it. So if a few other people can put in the chat that they can hear it, then I'll know, and then I have good sound on this end. Good, okay. Something's just weird with mine.
I can hear it.
Okay, great. We have other people saying they can hear it. Great. For some reason, mine's weird. So I'm glad you all can hear it. I will stop pausing it now. So here we go.
the 4th Army Intelligence School was started on a shoestring budget in a converted airplane hangar at the Presidio in San Francisco. After Pearl Harbor, Executive Order 9066 resulted in the forced removal of all people of Japanese ancestry from the West Coast into 10 incarceration camps. Under the command of Kai Rasmussen, a search for a new location of the school began. While visiting the 7th Corps area, Rasmussen met then-Governor of Minnesota, Harold Stassen, who suggested a former Civilian Conservation Corps camp in Savage. The language school opened at Camp Savage under the new name Military Intelligence Service Language School in the summer of 1942. In 2 years' time, Camp Savage graduated about 1,200 Nisei, or second-generation Japanese Americans, and 200 other soldiers, taught by 90 instructors. With continued recruitment efforts, many of whom were enlisted or drafted from incarceration camps, Camp Savage quickly outgrew its facilities. Just 16 miles northeast of Savage, Fort Snelling had announced plans to close as an induction center by mid-1944. Classes started at Fort Snelling that summer on August 21st. By the summer of 1946, the MISLS had trained some 6,000 men and women, with a little over 4,000 graduating from Fort Snelling, a majority of whom were Nisei. Today, the former military reservation resembles only a fragment of what it once was. Under the purview of the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, the 41-acre Upper Post site has been considered for revitalization for many years. The remaining 26 buildings are slated to be 200 affordable apartments pending funding. The housing will prioritize veterans and their families. Let's take a look at a few of these buildings, and I'll tell you a bit about how they were used when the MISLS was at Fort Snelling. We'll visit some buildings in both the lower post at Historic Fort Snelling and the upper post. We'll start at the former MISLS headquarters building, and then the soldiers' barracks, the gymnasium or the service club, and the post hospital. I'll also point out some structures that are no longer there, like the turkey farm, the baseball stadium and athletic fields, and the hospital wards. And then we'll make our way over to the field house, buildings 18 and 17, and the post chapel. Finally, we'll finish our visit by the round tower. Now let's get started.
From the towering cliffs overlooking the mighty Mississippi and the majestic Minnesota rivers, Fort Snelling, the oldest military post in the Northwest, presents transcribed, "This is Your Army."
I'm standing here about a half-mile south of the lower post in front of the band barracks building number 57 on Taylor Avenue. The building behind me here was originally constructed in 1903 to house 28 musicians. And we can see that it is really close to the headquarters building right behind me, where you see the clock tower in the middle, because the band would play morning guard mounts and evening retreat ceremonies.
The 1946 MISLS album called this building the brain cell for all military orders and housed the offices of the commandant, the assistant commandant, and the director of intelligence, among others.
Now I'm standing a little further down Taylor Avenue, and the buildings behind me are the former infantry barracks that date back to the late 1880s. They are buildings 101, 102, and 103. They housed the school's director of academic training, military training, and also the library.
Building 102 was used as classrooms for the MISLS. Although these buildings are not accessible, Building 103 can be explored through the University of Minnesota's virtual MISLS application. The app gives you an inside look at the former barrack, and you can learn the history of the school through photographs and stories from former students. By the summer of 1945, there were 125 classrooms with about 20 students in each class. The language training program was overseen by John Iso, the director of academic training. The program taught students reading, writing, and speaking Japanese, translation, interpretation, and interrogation with a focus on military and technical terms, Japanese geography and map reading, and radio monitoring. Their daily schedules were intense, with classes from 7:30 or 8 in the morning to 5 p.m. with lunch and dinner breaks, followed by an evening study session from 7 to 9 p.m. Many continued to study after lights out under the covers with a flashlight or in the latrines. In 1945, the Chinese and Korean language divisions were also added, and after Japan's surrender, the curriculum focus shifted to oral communication.
And on the other side of Building 103 at the far end would have been another barrack that looked just like these and two square brick buildings. They were all demolished in the 1960s with the construction of the Twin Cities International Airport.
It was noted in the school album that the brick school buildings were bulwarks against Minnesota's climatic ferocity. They must have been an upgrade from the rather hastily constructed facilities at Camp Savage, and definitely superior to the temporary tar paper shacks, nicknamed the Turkey Farm.
And beyond here at the very end of Taylor Avenue would have been the Turkey Farm next to the Fort Snelling Reception Center. It housed incoming and outgoing personnel from various companies.
One student, Ko Sameshima, recounted his reaction when he arrived from an incarceration camp in December of 1944. It was especially morale-shattering for me to be assigned quarters in a 5-man tar and paper shack in a sector of rows of such shacks. Another student expressed relief in moving from the smoky ice boxes to the luxurious comfort of the brick barracks.
And looking back up over to the lower post, you have to imagine that this street would have been lined with elm trees, and before the highway bisected the upper post from the lower post, Taylor Avenue would have extended all the way to the round tower. And the two posts were also connected by a streetcar line called the Dummy Line that ran behind these infantry barracks all the way around the round tower and then to the Twin Cities.
The MISLS training history stated one of the reasons for moving to Minnesota as the nearness of two large cities, Minneapolis and St. Paul, where students could readily be absorbed for recreation purposes. The cities offered a weekend getaway for Nisei to enjoy the movies, restaurants, and bars. Back at the fort, off-duty entertainment was enjoyed at the fort's Post Theater, located around where Highways 55 and 5 meet today.
The Post Theater would have been in this area before the construction of the highways. The building behind me is the old gymnasium, or the Service Club. It was constructed in 1903 and remodeled in the early 1940s. When they remodeled it, they included a ballroom on the second floor, a lounge, a reading room, and pool tables on the main floor, 3 bowling lanes, and a branch post exchange in the basement.
The Service Club must have been a lively place at any given time, with Wednesday night dances, tired students getting their Java fix at the post exchange, and bowling tournaments between companies.
Outdoors and across the street from the old gymnasium were the baseball diamonds and athletic fields, where there's a healthy competition amongst the company softball and touch football leagues.
The school album proclaimed that the Fort Snelling All-Star basketball and baseball teams won the acclaim of the Northwest people by their sterling brand of ball playing and sportsmanship. And Minnesota's harsh winter didn't ward off sports enthusiasts learning to ski in nearby slopes from instructor Lieutenant George Asai. Next to the baseball stadium were rows of temporary buildings constructed during World War II, opposite the post hospital. According to the school's training history, one of these buildings, Ward 11A of Station Hospital, was turned over to be used as barracks for the arrival of an entirely new detachment in the fall of 1944. Only a couple of months after the first class at Fort Snelling, the post welcomed the Women's Army Corps, or the WAC detachment. By the following summer, their numbers grew to 51 and were housed in 2 wards. These wards were furnished as a day room and squad room, equipped with their own laundry room. With so few women on post, the skewed ratio was approximately 58 men to 1 woman. Although the women were in class separately from the men, their coursework was the same, with the exception of interrogation. During the years since their activation, it was noted that there was not one entry made in the company punishment book of the WAC detachment. Of the 51 women, there were 13 who were sent to work as clerks and translators to Japan. They were the first enlisted women to arrive in Tokyo in January of 1946 and worked in General MacArthur's headquarters. After 6 to 9 months of intense training, the servicemen and women would celebrate their graduation in a commencement ceremony in the field house.
I'm standing about a half-mile northwest of where we were in the upper post in front of the former field house. Today it is called the Northern Star Scouting Base Camp. The building was constructed in 1907 to be used as an indoor drill hall. Both the artillery and cavalry troops used it over the wintertime. By World War II, it was called the field house. A concrete floor was treated for dancing, and live events were hosted here.
The language school students held boxing matches here. One boxing team even went to the Golden Gloves tournament and to the 7th Service Command meet, where they took 3rd place. Over the Christmas of 1944, the 125-person Nisei Fort Snelling choir was broadcast worldwide. The field house was open to the public on Christmas morning for their performance. The commencement ceremonies awarded the best all-around student, the best soldier, and the student who has made the most progress. In the August 25th issue of the Fort Snelling Bulletin in 1945, General Clayton Bissell was quoted in an address to one graduating class. "The Nisei of this school will be absolutely essential to the successful occupation of Japan and to the winning of peace. They will now serve as the language bridge between the Allied occupation forces and the 80 million people of Japan." On the east facade of the field house, we can see the remnants of previous Fort Snelling soldiers who left their names and some dates engraved on exterior bricks. Now let's make our way over to the lower post. I'd like to show you a few more buildings.
These are buildings 18 and 17, the former cavalry barracks from 1905. They were constructed as double barracks with 2-tiered verandas. And as I mentioned earlier, the upper post and the lower post were connected by a streetcar line that would go by the round tower back there and switch over to the public line, come out this way, and connect to the Twin Cities where the students could get away for the weekend. Building 18 behind me will be the new visitor center and is expected to be completed in 2022 and will include a new landscape for outdoor learning. The Fort Snelling telephone directories from 1944 to 1945 tells us that Company C of the language school was housed in 17A, the far east wing. And starting in April of 1945, Company D was housed in the West Wing.
First Lieutenant Peter Yamazaki, who organized the choir, was the commander of Company C for some time. Companies E and F, housed in Building 18, made the Fort Snelling Bulletin headlines in February of 1945 for their mess coming close to Kitchen of the Week. I'm not sure what they were cooking, but according to one Nisei WAC, there was a rice and shoyu or soy sauce fund that soldiers would contribute money to. When enough money was collected, sometimes they'd have teriyaki pork that you could smell all over the post. In one school album photo, the caption reads, Dear Mom, the Army sure feeds me good. I'm getting fatter every day eating conglomeration of slop they sling at me.
Now let's head down the street towards the Fort Snelling Memorial Chapel.
Constructed over the winter of 1927 to 1928, this was the first pan-sectarian chapel at an Army garrison.
It was constructed using salvaged stone from the old Mississippi River Bridge using soldier labor.
It served as a community center of sorts for the post, where students attended services, visited the library's stock of books, and married before deployment. One Nisei couple, Terry Toyome Ueno of the WAC detachment and Toshio Nakanishi, a Camp Savage graduate, were one of the first Nisei couples to be married there in the fall of 1945, just 3 weeks prior to him going overseas. Another couple, George and Yoshi Tani, were married in February of 1945. In her memoir, Yoshi explained that their parents were unable to attend since they were in the Mendota camp. Guests included George's Army unit, Company I, and its commander, Captain Spark Matsunaga, who later served in the U.S. Senate and helped pass the Civil Liberties Act of 1988.
Now let's head back over to the Round Tower where we will end our visit today. The Round Tower is one of the fort's original structures dating back to the early 1820s. It served many purposes over the years, including as a guardhouse, an office, and for coal storage. In the 1930s, it was the residence for the post electrician whose wife ran a beauty shop.
Later, it was converted and opened as a museum in 1941, operated by the Minnesota Historical Society. However, it was closed for the most part during World War II. In the 1960s, it was restored to what it likely looked like in the 1820s. In June of 1946, the 21st and last class graduated from Fort Snelling. The following month, the school moved to the Presidio of Monterey, California. Earlier in the fall, Colonel Rasmussen held a press conference acknowledging the accomplishments of the Nisei Linguists. The War Department's press release stated that by 1946, graduates had been placed in approximately 130 different Army and Navy units. Never before in history did one army know so much concerning its enemy prior to actual engagement as did the American Army during most of the Pacific Campaign. Information obtained by these men cannot be measured in words, but by the weight of victory itself. Wartime contributions of Nisei were noted and measured in lives saved and victories abroad. All the while, uncertainties of their families and loved ones in incarceration camps must have weighed heavily on their minds and hearts. お父さんお母さんのことをいつも思っております。早く平和の日が来るのを楽しみにして、また一緒に暮らしをするのを待っています。Okine Masao from Fort Snelling, July 21st, 1945. Even after the school's departure, it left a lasting legacy as a Japanese-American community was established in the Twin Cities during and after the war. Many soldiers and their families made Minnesota their new home. Today, the Minnesota Historical Society welcomes thousands of visitors each year to Historic Fort Snelling, which encompasses the reconstructed 1820s-era fort, although the stories we tell extend beyond the 1820s. Visitors get to hear the stories of those connected to this place, the stories of Native Americans, enslaved individuals like Dred and Harriet Scott, enlisted soldiers and their families, women, African Americans, and the Japanese Americans in the Military Intelligence Service Language School.
Let their stories come alive as you walk the grounds where there is so much history. We hope that visitors can walk away learning from the past to better understand the present. Thank you for tuning in to our tour of the Military Intelligence Service Language School at Historic Fort Snelling, and we hope that you can visit us in the future.
You should go back to your nowhere, leaving me with a memory.
All right. Good, good. Okay. Can hear me again. And we've got some questions here too, it looks like. We've got some, what a wonderful film and excellent presentation, people are saying. All good things. If you have questions about that, you feel free to send them in right now, but we have some here too. So, Kimmy, if you're ready, I can ask some here. How were the Nisei soldiers received or treated by the Twin Cities community while off of post?
So yeah, thank you everyone. And it was really fun making this film and I learned a lot. So I'm happy to hear that other people enjoy it just as much as I enjoyed making it. So, and to answer your question, I talk a little bit about it in the film about how one of the reasons, so when the school was looking for a new location and they chose actually Savage, Minnesota, Camp Savage first, they sort of were looking for 5 criteria. And one of the criteria was that they thought that it was great that the post was near the 2 big cities. And they wanted it to be able to be easy for the soldiers to integrate into the community without racial discrimination. So I think that, you know, surviving veterans and family members of the veterans, if you talk to them today in the Twin Cities, a lot of people will tell you that they chose to continue to live in the Twin Cities because it was friendly and it was welcoming to them. But I will say that I think that, you know, there were 4,000 students that graduated just when it was at Fort Snelling, and then nearly 2,000 from Camp Savage. And I think all of the students' experiences were different. And there are some accounts also of definitely housing discrimination, at least for the Nisei, the Japanese Americans who were removed from the West Coast and then who decided to relocate to the Twin Cities. There was some job and housing discrimination. And I also know of at least one account of the Nisei soldiers who had a hard time finding a barber for them to cut their hair. So I think that it is really just kind of a mixed, you know, when they would go off post, I think some of them felt like it was very welcoming and friendly, and then other people had other experiences. So, you know, like with any story, it's just a mixed sort of experience.
Another question we have from a viewer is, how was filming funded? Was it grants or MNHS?
It was, well, we'll just call it was a low budget film. I was lucky enough to have a partner who has some recording equipment. So I used sort of what I had in-house, and then I guess I was also, you know, lucky enough and privileged enough to kind of have a little bit of background knowledge of how to edit film. And so, yeah, it was just funded in-house.
Very cool. Here's another one. What were some resources you used in researching for this film? Is that kind of connected to the last one?
Yeah, so of course the community, the Japanese American community, has always been such a great resource. The Twin Cities Japanese American Citizens League, a lot of the people who are part of the education committee for the JACL, the Japanese American Citizens League, they had family members who were at the school. and there are also veterans from the school. They're always such a great resource, but there's also the MNHS library. The Gale Family Library has archives with training history. And one of the main sources I used was the MISLS school album from 1946. And a lot of those historic photos are from that album. And that is actually, it's been digitized through the California State University. And along with the California universities, there are lots of other digital archives that I use too, like the Densho repository. And they have such great, there are oral history interviews, and there are photographs and journal entries, the letters. The letter that you saw towards the end of the film was from the California State University archives. So it was really fun to sort through all of that.
What were some things you learned while researching and developing the film?
Yeah, well, I think I'm always learning new things all the time about this part of the fort's history, but also just Minnesota history. And that's one of the things I think Nancy would agree with me that we like about our job, is that we learn new things all the time. And I would say that for this particular project, I learned, again, that just the variety of experiences that the soldiers had, and that if you read kind of just a few of the articles, or if you don't dig too deep into the history, I think it's easy to kind of skim the surface and sort of make it into kind of a monolithic understanding of what the soldiers' experiences were. But for me, it was really a learning experience to read some of the personal accounts, the letters that were written by the soldiers. And they're very heart-wrenching, but also there was somewhat of a sense of hope in reading these letters that I really appreciated, especially during these times that we're in right now.
Yeah. We definitely have time to keep answering these questions. This is always my favorite part of webinar, so make sure you keep sending in your questions here. But we have another one here. If you could sum up the story of the students at the language school in one word, what might that be?
Yeah, it's a hard one, because a lot of words come to mind, but maybe the best one is the word perseverance. And, I just think about, while I was researching and learning about their lives, I thought, if I was there in their shoes at that time, would I have had the courage, the guts to, volunteer, and at the same time try to fight discrimination and racism. And I don't know that I would, that I would have. And I think that, yeah, I don't know if perseverance does justice to what they went through, but that's maybe the best word that I can come up with: the persistence and the patience and the courage that they had to do what they did.
Yeah. Got another question. Do you have any idea how many went through Fort Snelling during World War II that were being inducted into the Army?
Yeah, so, the language school in and of itself, there were about 4,000 students who graduated just Fort Snelling, and then from Camp Savage there were almost 2,000. So total of about 6,000. And then that first class at the Presidio in San Francisco was almost 60 students.
Overall, there were about 300,000 men and women who were inducted at Fort Snelling.
Right, I should say, before the language school was at Fort Snelling, it was an induction center for the first year of the war. Is that right, Nancy? Or the first couple of years of the war?
Yeah, total of about 300,000, a lot of people.
Good. And another one here. Did any part of the story surprise you? Which school?
Yeah, I think long before I even, was working for the Minnesota Historical Society, I really didn't know much about the language school. And, I would drive on the highway and I'd go to the Mall of America or to the airport and I would see the buildings kind of off to the side. And I always wondered, I wonder what those old buildings are about. And then when I learned about the language school, I was really blown away because I thought, wow, like a school where there were mostly Japanese American soldiers in Minnesota of all places, and I grew up in Japan. I moved here when I was little, and just to learn about that connection, that really was surprising to me, just even before I dug deep into the research. And I don't actually have a personal connection to the school in terms of, I don't have family members who were at the school or anything like that. But I also learned that really the reason why there was a Japanese American community during and after the war was because of the school. And this community was really the one that was behind starting a St. Paul Nagasaki Sister City Committee. This is the first Japanese American U.S. Sister City partnership in all of the United States. And that is how my parents met, is through this student exchange program that was through the St. Paul Nagasaki Sister City. So learning all of those connections, really, I think it just goes to show you just all of the history that's around us all the time, and the buildings that hold that history, and how we are connected. I think that's one of the things that I love about history, is that we are really connected to this history connects us to today, and we are connected to it.
It's very fun to see the connections. I think that's what a lot of us love about history, is it seems so far away, and then we see these connections in our own life, and it's always fun. We have more of a comment than a question here, but it's always fun to share those things as well. Todd says, side story, Bud Nakasone, 1954 to 46 class, was a high school student near Pearl Harbor when it was attacked. Bud stayed in the Twin Cities after the war and married a Swedish woman. Bud's other grandfather, was a St. Paul boy who was in the Navy in the war. He was also at Pearl Harbor during the attack as a sailor on the USS Ward, as it attacked a Japanese midget submarine an hour before the planes attacked. So some more connections here.
Yeah, Bud is a really great guy. I will promote another film actually called The Registry, and it features some of the veterans, and it's a story about how their effort to collect all of the names of the students, and to kind of get in touch with each other. And it's a really great film. Bud is in it for a short time. And Bud lives in the Twin Cities today. And you can actually, if you do get a chance to go to the Minnesota Historical Society YouTube channel, you can also find a video with Bud Nakasone in it. And you can hear his story through his own voice.
Not any questions lined up, so keep sending them in, but I have a question.
Yeah.
Not too specific to the film, but I'm excited to go to museums again once we're able to do so. And I know Fort Snelling is going through a lot of change right now, so is there something either of you are excited for that we should be excited for when we're able to come and visit?
That's a great question. We are, focused on the future and looking forward to when we're on the other side of all this and reopening. As I said in the introduction, it's so hard not to be at that site and be greeting people and having these conversations. But this is exciting too, to be able to find a new avenue for bringing history to so many people, and things like the film Kimmy put together. Now we're sharing that with people across, Minnesota and further, so that people don't have to come just to the site to enjoy the content. But on the other side, we are very much looking forward to not only our revitalized site with the landscape and the new visitor center. We actually were in there yesterday and so excited to see the progress. And I know sites like Sibley, we can't wait to get back to having people come to us. And a project like this that it kind of came, Kimmy heard about, and we just jumped at the chance to do this film, which Kimmy was supposed to take part in a workshop that had to go virtual, and decided to do this film. And so it's really shown us some very exciting opportunities that take us out of, what we have done before, and we're looking forward to doing again, but into some really different things. So that's my long answer to that one. I'm sure Kimmy has hers as well.
Yeah, Nancy had mentioned earlier that we are looking forward to this new visitor center and our revitalization project. And I'm really looking forward. So the buildings 17 and 18, as mentioned in the film, they were barracks, soldiers' barracks at the time that the language school was there. And I'm really looking forward to the possibility of inviting some of the Japanese American community members to see the new visitor center in an old barrack. And maybe, someone like Bud Nakasone, for him to be able to go into, this is where he was sleeping, where these were his quarters when he was at the language school. So I'm looking forward to just kind of seeing how he reacts to being in that old building again, but in a new life.
All good things to look forward to. Here we go. We have a comment that Anna's saying they love that we get to watch the film with the director and writer and researcher present, which is true. Not very often do we get to watch films and have the work behind it there as well. So that is wonderful. While we wait for a little bit more questions, I'm gonna just give some updates about Sibley. We were not able to open this year to stay safe while having tours for COVID, but we have things like this. And next Thursday, we have a group called the Friends of the Sibley Historic Site, who support us and help us put on events and help us volunteer and all sorts of things. They have a presentation on Sibley and Ramsey and how they were both friends and kind of political rivals as well. So that's next Thursday at 7, I think I'm right, it's 7 o'clock in the evening, but that's on our website as well. And then next Saturday, we're getting together for a socially distanced nature tour walk at Sibley. We have the beautiful river that we share, and one of our guides is going to talk about how the river's changed and how we've used it for different things and how Sibley interacted with it. So that's next Saturday. That can be signed up on our website. Next month's Mendota After Hours is going to be on Pike Island, which is on the river, and how the fight for that for the government and what cities wanted it and what not. So that is next month. So make sure you keep your eyes out for those things, and your support and donations help us keep doing these things. Like Nancy has said, it's been a hard time, but it's also great to do these virtual things. It's got us just to be creative and to come up with different things. So I really enjoyed that, and it sounds like many of my coworkers have as well. I'm not seeing any more questions. Do you have any other closing thoughts, Nancy or Kimmy?
Well, I was going to share quick just that YouTube channel link for everybody in case you wanted to share with your friends or other people. And then it's also, I'm going to share a link to that University of Minnesota, the virtual MISLS that you saw in the film. And it's a really neat you get to sort of walk through one of the historic buildings, and you can hear there's audio from some of the veterans talking about their time at Fort Snelling, and it's really neat. So I will share those two things for everyone.
Do check that out. I've watched it over and over, and it's just amazing. You feel like you are in the building as you walk through, and that's where technology is just such a help right now with everything we're doing. But it's taking us into some really fun, exciting, and challenging directions that I am just so enjoying being part of. I learn something every day. We're working on other short films and presentations, especially for K-12. We are working on, and Kimmy's working on several, and some of our staff at the fort are working on presentations and interactive learning modules to send to help teachers. So that's something else we're working on together as a group. But as Kimmy said, check out that YouTube channel, because there's some amazing resources on there to enjoy. So we'll continue putting things up there. And, if you have further questions too, you can always let Michaela know. She'll pass them over. And we're looking forward to next year too, Michaela, when maybe we can do something between Sibley and the fort. And we've done many programs in the past. So we'll look at that as something down the line to be excited about as well.
Yes, that'd be wonderful. And so that link that she sent is in your chat box. It might not be open, but if you look at the bottom of your screen and click chat, it'll be there. Or if you just want to send me an email afterwards, I can always gather that information and send it to you. After I close this out, Zoom should open your browser to another website. It's just a quick little survey that shouldn't take more than 5 minutes. So if you can, please fill that out, because it helps us know what we did well and what we can improve on. But I enjoyed this, and I hope everyone else did. Enjoy your Friday night. Maybe come join us for the nature walking tour, and definitely come join us again on these webinars in the next few months. But thank you, Kimmy and Nancy, for joining us. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Michaela.
Really enjoyed it, and hopefully we can do this again sometime. We would love to, and thank you so much. Appreciate it. Everybody joining too.
Yes, thank you all. I'm gonna end here. Oh wait, we got one little thing. Oh, another comment that says you guys are fantastic. So great.
Okay,
Don't
thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everyone, for watching and for enjoying the film as much as I enjoyed making it, and Michaela for having us. So we hope that we can welcome visitors in person, and then you can hear a bit more about the language school in the future when you're able to come visit. So
yes, this is a good year for being hopeful for visiting all those things we've said we'd visit. So
right. Now we're getting our list going of everything we're going to do. So that's the great part.
Yes. All right. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you another time.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you.